Hey, you guys, it's Flickers of Fear time once again. So, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this at any point. I'm sure I probably have. But 2024 has honestly kind of been a hell of a year for horror movies. A lot of good shit came out this year. It's kind of been shitty in a lot of other aspects. But horror movies, man, golden. So much good shit has come out. So, I kind of feel like for that reason, I've been a lot more keen than usual to kind of keep up with all of the movies coming out because so many of them, like I said, have been good. Actually, I'm even considering, please don't hold me to this because I might not have time to do it, but I was actually considering doing a year-end best of, like 10 best horror movies, or my 10 favorite horror movies, I guess, of 2024 for the Scare Salon channel. And I've never actually done that before. I usually do, favorite movies from like old years, but I've never done like a recent one. But because there have been so many good movies that came out this year, and I've seen so many of them, I'm just kind of like, hey, maybe I'll get around to doing that. Like I said, don't hold me to it. I might not have time, but I am kind of planning on doing one of those. So because of that plan that I have, which may or may not come to fruition, I'm trying to cram in as many kind of acclaimed movies that have come out this year. Like I'm trying to get as many viewings in as I can, like before December 31st. So in the course of that endeavor, I finally got around to seeing a horror thriller that I've been hearing about for ages, and that would be JT Mollner's Strange Darling. Now, technically, this movie was released in 2023. It actually premiered at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas, back in September of 2023. But because it was given a theatrical release, very limited, but it wasn't given a theatrical release until August of 2024. So I'm actually counting it as a 2024 film, if that's okay with everybody. And even if it's not, it's my video. So what are you going to do? Now, here's something that I have said multiple times. In my opinion, all movies are better approached cold, like with as little foreknowledge about them as possible. In the case of Strange Darling, though, this is exponentially more true. So much so, in fact, that I feel like it's nearly impossible to review or talk about this movie without revealing the big twist. You know what I mean? So while I'm not going to be spelling out the entire plot of the thing, I will, just by sheer necessity, have to talk about, the elephant in the room, which is kind of the major subversion, which is at the heart of this movie. So again, I strongly, strongly suggest that you see the movie first before watching any more of this video. But, you're a grown-ass adult. You can do what you want, so I can't stop you if you just want to keep watching it. But this is your one and only spoiler warning. So Strange Darling is essentially a pretty slick, but kind of a classic serial killer thriller, but sort of filtered through the sensibilities of maybe like Pulp Fiction, particularly in its non-linear narrative structure, and also has a couple of little coy references to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I kind of got that vibe because it's purportedly based on true events, even though it's kind of not really. And it has like an opening crawl of text which says this, and this is narrated by Jason Patrick. Now, the visual style of this movie is amazing. Like, it's just incredible looking. And probably, no one was quite as surprised as I was, that the cinematographer on this is none other than the very prolific character actor and Scientologist, Giovanni Ribisi. This is actually, I believe, his debut as a cinematographer, which I didn't even know that he could do that. He's also credited as a producer on this, and he, as far as I could determine, he actually loaned a bunch of his own equipment to the production, which was kind of a low-ish budget. It's not super low budget, but low by Hollywood standards, you know what I mean? And I have to say that, holy shit, Giovanni, I didn't know you had it in you. If this is his first gig as a cinematographer, he's got a whole nother long career ahead of him, like along that line, because man, this movie is just a feast for the eyes. So this is set in rural Oregon, and the movie presents itself via title cards as a thriller in 6 chapters. Technically it's 7 because it has an epilogue, but close enough. It also has another title card which very proudly proclaims that it was shot on 35mm film. Now this is only JT Mollner's second full-length movie. His first was called Outlaws and Angels. It came out in 2016. I think it was a Western. But he's really into using vintage equipment and, real 35mm film for his projects, like no digital. That's kind of a purity I can always get behind, especially when you kind of have the stones to stick to your vision and your principles, and the art of it is what matters to you, which it really does seem to be for this director. Now, another thing that Mollner would not compromise on was the non-chronological order of the scenes in the film. Now, Miramax, who distributed this movie, they were super stoked to make this when Mollner first pitched it to them. Like, he said that he went in there and he just started the pitch and they were like, print it, we're doing it. You know what I mean? So they were like super excited about the premise. However, when the rubber hit the road and they started seeing the rushes, they saw like the first cut or whatever, they were not huge fans of the scenes being shown out of sequence, and even hired another editor, like as far as I know, like behind Mollner's back, to recut the movie into like a more standard like linear plot. Now Mollner got wind of this, threatened to take his name off the movie if it was released like that. And so I believe they screened both versions for test audiences, and the nonlinear version got an overwhelmingly positive reception. So Miramax eventually backed down and released it the way the director wanted in the first place. They even apologized to him for all of the fuss that they'd made, which I thought was kind of nice, actually. You don't hear about that much. The thing about the scenes being shown out of order is that you kind of have to do it like that because it's a really, really big part of what makes this movie work, what gives it its suspense, and what kind of underlies its subversion of thriller tropes, which is what this is doing. If this movie had been presented in order, I don't think it would have had nearly the same impact as it does the way it's presented. So what happens in this movie, you might ask? So after that opening text crawl saying that this story is based on the final few slayings of a serial killer's 2021 murder spree, which, like I said, they've asked him, is this really based on a real thing? And he's like, I don't know, maybe. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those Texas Chainsaw Massacre things, which is very loosely based on Ed Gein, but not really. So after that, we see chapter 3 unfolding before us. As I said, there's 6 chapters, but they're all out of order. In chapter 3, there is this very frantic-looking blonde woman. Now, she's credited only as the lady, and she's played by Willa Fitzgerald. So she's dressed in, like, red medical scrubs, it looks like, and she's bleeding from this real fucked-up-looking injury on the side of her head, and she's tearing down the road in this bright red, I believe it's a 1978 Pinto, and she's being pursued by a man who's credited only as the Demon and is played by Kyle Gallner, and he's in a pickup truck and he's shooting at her with a rifle. So the car flips over after the Demon shoots out the back window, and the lady, sets off on foot, and she eventually loses him temporarily and gets help at this kind of remote farmhouse, which is occupied by these 2 old hippies / doomsday preppers / Bigfoot enthusiasts. And they are played by Barbara Hershey and Ed Begley Jr. There's also a very brief scene somewhere in here where we see the Demon in a car, like on the driver's side, and it's just bathed in this blue neon light. It's really nice. And there's an unseen woman in the passenger seat who asks him point blank if he's a serial killer. And he doesn't answer, but then there's like a quick cut to him apparently strangling the life out of someone, like in what looks like a motel room. So the scenes then start to play out in this jumbled order, and they sort of slowly reveal the set of circumstances that led to the state of affairs at the beginning, like vis-a-vis the car chase and all of that. So some of the scenes, like we see the lady hiding somewhere in the farmhouse. You don't know exactly where she's hiding until later on, while the Demon is kind of searching for her, calling out for her, like with his rifle. Ed Begley Jr. is dead on the kitchen floor. Then we see the Demon in the car again, talking to the lady in front of a motel, where they've presumably come for a one-night stand. The lady at this point is dressed in kind of a sexier, like, club outfit. She's got a red wig. She's very flirtatious, and the 2 of them seem to have a real connection with one another. Like, they seem to be, like, really liking each other. Now, the lady tells the Demon, a lot of women like casual sex just as much as men do, but obviously for us it's much more dangerous because, that's kind of what led to her asking him if he was a serial killer, like, earlier on. There's also a thing where we see the lady and the Demon indulging in some kind of BDSM and role play in the motel, and you're led to believe it's at the lady's request. Now, the movie is structured very deliberately to suggest that the Demon picked the lady up, presumably at a bar earlier. The 2 of them hit it off, as happens sometimes, and decided to go to a nearby motel for sex. And then after that happened, the demon showed his true proclivities, right? The lady was able to escape somehow, and the demon was then kind of obliged to hop in his vehicle and chase her before she could report him to authorities. And indeed, in a standard thriller, this would be exactly what's happening. But in Strange Darling, the tropes are laid out the way they are, only in order to pull the rug out from underneath the audience, as it's eventually revealed that the lady is actually the serial killer and the demon is a cop. So everything we've seen up to the point of the twist is recontextualized in a pretty clever way that kind of like upends your expectations and kind of gives us kind of a fresh angle on a pretty well-worn, thriller formula. Now, I will admit that the implications of the gender politics here, the way this is presented, could absolutely be seen as problematic, and could be seen as playing into maybe like misogynistic beliefs about women as crazy or manipulative or using victimhood in order to victimize men, like for their own sick amusement. I don't think that this was the conscious intent of the film, though it could be read that way. I think that JT Mollner was just trying to do something interesting with the established trappings of the thriller genre by turning assumptions upside down. You know what I mean? That said, his decision to call the man the demon may be an obvious nod to kind of manosphere type complaints that straight men are demonized by, maybe women assuming dudes they don't know are predators. But honestly, I don't know. I liked the movie so much that I'm kind of willing to give the director the benefit of the doubt in that regard. I mean, there are a few female serial killers, after all. None of them really operate this way necessarily, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. And even though this movie isn't actually based on a true story, as far as I'm aware, despite its claims to the contrary, it's, not outside the realms of possibility that something like this could happen. And it kind of also makes a really interesting examination of presumptions that we make about how these types of movies play out, as well as how scenarios like this might actually play out in real life. So, I mean, in aggregate, though, like, I can totally see why Strange Darling is ending up on so many best of 2024 lists, like, around the internet. You know what I mean? It's gorgeous to look at. It's got outstanding acting performances by the two leads, has a beautiful score and soundtrack. Like, the use of music is really, really good. It has some really, really very welcome threads of black humor in it, especially the scenes with the weird hippies. Like, if you've seen it, like the breakfast that they make and like the Scott Baio puzzle and it's like all this other kind of stuff, it's just, and it's not explained and it's like super weird and I love it. And it also has some really, really good realistic like gore effects. Like, it's pretty violent, you know what I mean? And I feel like the kind of disordered nature of the plot really serves to heighten the tension, and it kind of draws you into the story. It gets you kind of more invested as the details of the situation of what's happening like start slowly slotting into place. You know what I mean? Now, although, as I mentioned earlier, the messaging of the film could be seen as questionable and maybe feeding into some negative stereotypes, I kind of feel like the movie itself, the whole of it, is just so, kind of cool and edgy and vivid and entertaining that you probably won't mind all that much. Personally, it didn't really bother me. Like, I kind of saw it and I was kind of like, I don't know if I love that. But I mean, just the movie was so cool that it didn't really bother me. I was just really content to just admire the skill that the director used in messing with my presuppositions and kind of bringing something fairly original to the table in regards to the thriller genre, which, is generally pretty formulaic. The movie is definitely like a vibe, so you're either going to be there for it or you're not, but I mean, I was totally there for it, and, maybe you will be too. So that will do it for this Flickers of Fear. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.